Welcome to the Really Know Your Customer podcast with your hosts, Betsy Westhafer and Tony Bodoh. Join Betsy and Tony as they dive in with highly successful C-suite leaders who have grown successful organizations by creating a laser focus on listening to their customers and building deep customer relationships. Now, it's time to join Betsy and Tony for the Really Know Your Customer show.
Welcome to the Really Know Your Customer podcast. I'm Tony Bodoh here again with Betsy Westhafer, and today we have an amazing guest, Tim Hinckley. And Tim is going to share his perspective, which is both as an expert and also as a thought leader in the space of the omnichannel and retail. And so I'm going to pass it over to you, Betsy, to tell people who Tim is and why we've got him on the show today.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. Yeah, we are so excited to have Tim Hinckley on our show today. Tim and I go back a few years. We, full disclosure, we worked together on the Radial Customer Advisory Board, and we are so excited to have you here, Tim, today. Tim's the Chief Commercial Officer, and I can say personally, I have learned so much from Tim just by watching how he engages with customers. So I'm so excited to have this conversation. So Tim, welcome.
Well, thank you, Betsy and Tony. It's my pleasure, and thank you for having me as your guest. I'm looking forward to the conversation. Hopefully, we can have a little fun while we're at it and also enlighten some of the folks out there in the audience.
Absolutely. Tim, can you just start off by telling us your background? I know you have a long history in this industry. Well, long history, not to
I'm
be
that old.
I was going to say, we do this on video. I see the reaction when I said long history. But can you just kind of walk us through your professional career in this industry?
Sure, Betsy. So it goes all the way back to my college days. I, like many people, worked during college. So one of my jobs was loading trailers at UPS from 4 to 8 in the morning. And what I learned is this industry has its own vernacular. So at UPS, it's not called a trailer, it's called a feeder. And believe it or not. So how the heck they ever ended up with that name, I don't know, but you learn really quickly. That's what it is. And it worked well for me. I had a lot of fun doing it. It paid very well in Toledo, Ohio in the time that I worked there. It was a very good paying job. It gave me the flexibility to go to college and work at the same time. And but it was only a part-time thing. I didn't know that I was going into logistics at that point in time. Moved over and graduated, went to work for a company called Radio Shack. For those of you that are old enough to remember Radio Shacks, in the 80s, they had everything you can imagine, from boom boxes to computers to electronic componentry, batteries, crazy stuff like that. And I was fascinated with the company because they were one of the early companies with PCs. So they had a thing called a TRS-80. I was a little bit of a geek in the way that I was like, hey, how does this computer type thing work? And I got to sell them and run a store. So at a very early age, straight out of college, I was running a Radio Shack store, which doesn't sound like much, but in the world of retail, this predates planograms or anything like that. So as a store manager, you hired people, you fired people, you set the floor, you decided what inventory you needed. You were in essence a general manager of a real business. You had your own P&L that you look at your comps. It was a very powerful thing for a young guy. So that intrigued me, went to work for them for a bit, but I'm the type of guy that can't sit still, as you know, Betsy. So I decided waiting for people to come to me wasn't the deal. Moved over to a company called Dictaphone, and unfortunately, a lot of these companies have changed, but Dictaphone has since morphed into a company called Nuance. And their focus was transcription. They were heavy into ambulatory, legal, doctors' offices, governmental agencies. And so I took over as a regional manager for them and grew that. But the real forte back into logistics came with a small company in the early 80s called Roadway Package System. Today it's known as FedEx Ground. And it was at that job that all of those predecessor jobs really started to culminate and turn into something powerful, because I was able to relate back to a store manager running a store. The technology and the information empowered it, inventory flows. I understood the operational side as to what does it take to get a product from A to B. Those cartons just show up on your doorstep, but when you're behind the scenes, you really learn how the sausage is made, and it's quite complex, and there's a lot of pieces to it and a lot of people involved. So Fortunately, that worked out great. It turned into a 27-year career with FedEx. I did just about everything you could do at FedEx, worked at most of the operating companies in one way or another. I either directly worked for them or I supported them. And that was a lot of fun. At the age of 50, I decided to go back and get my MBA. My oldest son was going off to college, and I was not a good college student. I had a lot of fun in college, still have very vivid memories of that, but I thought I would try to be a good role model, and I thought it would be a good time to, reinvigorate that academia view, and went for a general MBA. I graduated 2 years later from Auburn which was great, and a company called Hasbro Toys, which I'm sure everybody knows if you know Nerf and My Little Pony and all those games, Monopoly and Scrabble that everybody's playing right now with their kids at their houses. That was the company, and I took over his job as the senior vice president of global logistics for them, which was really exciting because I was able to take the 27 years of knowledge that I had at FedEx in developing and building a shared service organization for supply chain. So it was in the area to take all that knowledge and build all that out. And so we went about that and built that, and we were able to grow the company by $1.5 billion. We were able to avoid the slowdown associated with West Coast ports and outstrip and outpace our competition. So it was a great learning bed for me because I was able to prove, A, to Hasbro, but B, also to myself and others, that in today's day, supply chain is more relevant than ever, and it is a strategic weapon. It is something that will make the difference between your survival and thriving, or in some cases, as you're seeing in the news today, people really, really, really in bad straits, right? So that's exciting. And then most recently, Radial hired me a couple of years ago, just shy of 2 years ago, to come and take over their commercial operations and help reinvigorate and grow that company to its potential. And it's been a rocket ride since. We've, in terms of new client acquisition and growth, we've more than doubled historical levels of growth. And it's not because anything I did other than unlock the potential of the people that were there and simply give them a different vantage point to look at things. So it's been really exciting. Hopefully that gives everybody a little bit of my background, and I didn't talk too long.
No, that's great, Tim. Thanks. So you deal with retail clients, correct?
The majority of our clients are in the retail sector, and that's our heritage. So we came out of a company called GSI Commerce. It became eBay Enterprise, but we started as a merchant at heart. And so our company actually was a merchant, and then we helped other merchants and retailers. So that's our heart, and the bulk of our business is there. And the majority of our business, about 85% of our business, is e-commerce direct to consumer. So that's something that makes Radial very special and different. Almost everybody else in this business started off in the B2B space and is trying to get into e-commerce. I can tell you that it's a lot easier to do B2B shipments than it is direct to consumer shipments. So I think we have a unique advantage in value proposition.
Yeah. So just in the 2 years that you've been there, what's been one of the biggest changes you've seen specifically to e-commerce?
Well, consumerism is definitely the winner, right? And knowing your customer, the title of your podcast, it couldn't be more relevant than it is today. So if you think of your audience and the audience members, think of your last shopping experience. You went to a strip center, you went to a mall, and you probably saw the same stuff that you saw on the last trip, right? Nothing was special, piles of stuff stacked high and deep. It really kinders back to the 1950s style of retailing. But I can also say that there are some great digitally native clients. There's some great omnichannel clients that have reinvigorated that experience. So they truly know who Tony is. They know what his likes are. They know what his motivating factors are. They know what Betsy likes, and they're going to cater and build loyalty campaigns around you as a unique client. They're going to know what you like to buy, whether that's for yourself or for a gift. And so what that's done is it's created a very powerful channel. And ironically, what we're facing right now with everybody being sequestered in their house is actually turning out to be probably what I believe is the largest paradigm shift ever in the history of retail. And what I mean by that is virtually everybody. My mother, who's in her 80s, has now learned how to get her groceries online, right? How to shop like never before online with things coming to her. And for somebody that's at her age where it's not always easy to get around, right? Life has become much easier for her. And she's actually enjoying some of that enabling factor. If you talk to younger generations, they have an opportunity to shop across a broader swath. So you have companies like Gymshark, which has started in Europe using social media, and they're exploding here. Their sales are just going like crazy. They don't own a single retail store, right? And they don't hire high-profile people to convince people that, hi, my product is the best, like we're used to. What they're doing is they're getting at the heart, and they're saying, Betsy, we know you are into fitness, and maybe you like walking, and here's some great walking apparel. Tony, we know that you like to be comfortable, right? So here's a great way to be comfortable in today's environment, right? And that affinity to that customer and that linkage to that customer experience is more powerful than ever before. So it's really exciting times.
So Tim, that brings us back to a comment you made when we were talking in our prep session. We were talking about omnichannel and the power of omnichannel, and you said there were 3 areas that really are important as we make this transition. And obviously it's been going on for a while now, at least 10, 15 years that we can really point to. But in that process of our conversation, you went deeper into these 3 areas. So pull those up, because you just actually laid out the case. Now let's go deeper so people can understand what's actually going on behind the scenes, because it was fascinating to me to hear it all.
Yeah, no, my pleasure, Tony. So, in fact, if you read today's Wall Street Journal, and I'm an avid reader of it, what you saw is retailers, these traditional brick and mortar retailers with hundreds of stores. So, merchants at their heart love to tell you how many stores they have, right? I have 100 stores. I have 500 stores. I have 2,000 stores. Isn't that exciting, right? And ironically, in today's Wall Street Journal article, what you see is there's huge debt loads, there's huge rent payments for these store base, and a lot of these retailers are probably going to face some of the most difficult times because they've got all the workers furloughed, they have inventory across hundreds or thousands of stores that's sitting idle in many cases. They have large rent payments associated with that. They have large buying options, with product that may not even make it in season. So you think of Easter, which is upon us, there's a lot of Easter products sitting in stores that nobody's going to be able to get access to today. So the 3 aspects of omnichannel are the brick and mortar stores at its base, but it's also the fulfillment centers and the technology. And I can give you some real life examples. So most recently, when this whole thing started, and retailers were like, hey, how are we going to get stuff and make our clients feel comfortable? One of our clients said, which uses our technology, said, we can redirect those things and allow you to come to the store, and we can have curbside pickup. Don't even have to come into the store, right? So our technology allowed that order to be routed to the store closer to them. So the order gets processed as opposed to coming out of a centralized distribution center. And that consumer can come and get the goods out of that. So what that did is that unlocked inventory to people that might not have been able to get in there because their state had a mandate to close the stores. But it allowed the inventory to keep flowing out of the stores. All right, so that was one good example. Another good example is where do you ship the product from? We have another client that has their own warehouses and also uses us for e-commerce. And the reality is their mainline distribution centers got closed down, their retail stores got closed down, and so on and so forth. So with us, it allowed us to continue to flow the goods direct to the consumer. So we've been able to maintain the revenue streams and things like that. And then at a high level, all this can come together because it's not only just my technology, but it's technology in general in terms of connecting to the consumer, right?
Yeah.
So with this direct one-to-one relationship that's now available out there, there's another example I can give you. It's a large retailer, and they're not known to be in the food business. That's not their bread and butter business, right? But they do have it. And their product is not low end. It's for foodies. It's for the connoisseurs out there. But what's happened in this environment is people who want to eat. They've been able to identify a whole new audience that likes their product, have gone online, and they're up almost 400% year over year.
Wow.
With over 100% of their customers being new acquisition, people they've never done business with before. So as you can imagine, if you're the CEO of this company, and the conversation I had with their leadership team just the other day was, my goodness, we're not even advertising, and word of mouth and basic social media and Facebook and things like that have exploded upon us. We've got to get serious about e-commerce and direct to consumer and knowing our customer better, right? In that particular case, they had an antiquated profile built off of the consumers that came into their stores. That's who they thought their customer was. What they're finding out is there's a whole lot of people that may have been going out to restaurants before that have now become larger parts of their ecosystem and that client base. And their people are very excited about that. You talk about a company that's seen the future, saying, wow, we're now latching onto this huge clientele base. We're going to be able to have a direct-to-consumer experience. And this is really exciting stuff. So by linking those things together, we can do that. And Radial happens to be in a great position because our buildings use, they're multinodal, which means we have many of them, yet they can all be connected. And so we have a large beauty company that uses this across 5 buildings. That allows them to compete very fast. In other words, they have the right inventory at the right time for the right consumers, and they balance that inventory using our technology to optimize the inventory. Very exciting call from them just over the weekend. One of their top people called me up. We've been talking to them about using our distributed order management software for about 2 years. They're doing well. They're growing, very healthy, vibrant company, and they just had other priorities. But now they've realized they have all this inventory locked in these retail stores that they have. And they said, wow, we can unlock all that inventory and get same day, next day delivery to consumers who are clamoring for their goods, right? So as much as I'm shipping out of 5 locations, there's certain product lines that they didn't have in their e-commerce portfolio, so we weren't able to sell it.
Right.
So they basically said, let's get that technology deployed. Let's optimize all of our inventory across all of our channels and have a unified experience.
That reminds me a lot of how Netflix really came over the tipping point, because Netflix was really having hotspots where they were taking off, like LA and San Francisco and that, but they couldn't make Boston work, and they couldn't figure out why Boston wouldn't work until they went out there and started looking, and it was all about how close they were, because no one wants to wait 5 days for the next DVD to show up. They're going to go to Blockbuster. And once they start putting those warehouses all over, like you've just described, instantaneously, it changed their business.
Absolutely, Tony. So, here's the crazy thing is everybody thinks that the only way to do this is through Amazon, right? They think Amazon is the single place to shop. And what's happened recently is Amazon has curtailed their shipments to try to focus on more medical or other types of things. But what's happened is other people who are trying to get products have had those products slow down, right? And we've seen testament to that and news about that, and et cetera, et cetera. So the reality is we're actually, Radial itself is actually a certified prime fulfillment company for Amazon. So you can get 2-day delivery, put your stuff in my buildings, and we can still get it there in 2 days, and it can still be on Amazon's website, but you don't have to deal by their rules. You can get to somebody that actually, really cares and knows you, because we only have around 230 customers today. Mm-hmm. They're America's top brands. I mean, you would be amazed that more than likely, if you're ordering something online, one of my 230 brands is delivering stuff to you. You just don't know it. I've always been the quiet back end. But that being said, what we haven't done at Radial is go to the market to share that experience more. So part of it's getting out there and saying, hey, if you want to fulfill by Amazon, if you want a 1- and 2-day delivery type service, Radial can do that for you. And we can house your inventory in up to 21 locations across the United States. So just about any market can be hit very, very quickly. If you don't want to segment your inventory that much, we can go to fewer buildings. If you don't have the technology to figure out how much inventory to buy, ironically, your order management system will help you educate you because it's got an AI component built in.
I think this whole thing, of course, is devastating on a lot of levels, but the exciting thing for business it is just causing so many paradigm shifts and so many reasons to think differently. And, as business people, that should be very exciting to us. And the creativity that we've seen and the pivots we've seen, it's really shaking things up, which, personally I find to be very exciting.
So you're bringing up an excellent point, Betsy, and I'll give you a couple examples. One is in our own shop, okay? So in our Martinsville building, we've been doing embroidery for years. If you get a school uniform and it has your name, written in it, chances are that we were the ones doing that, okay? For all those kids out there that are not in school right now. But those school uniforms, we do business with one of the largest providers of school uniforms, and we do all of the embroidery. We put the crests on there, the kids' names on there, all that kind of stuff. And so our local team said, oh my, we could actually make masks. We know how to sew. We've got equipment to sew. We can do this. And so we partnered up with one of our clients who had fabric. And so we're cranking out a whole bunch of masks for not only our own workers in that market, but for the community that we operate within, because they're having a difficult time getting masks. So that's innovation. That's all of a sudden we're like, we never saw ourselves in that mode. We never thought about that as a business line. Maybe we should. Similarly, I've got another client that's a very, very prominent health and beauty line, and they converted a perfume factory into a hand sanitizer factory in literally a matter of a week or so. So think about that. So here's a company that was known to be a wonderful, wonderful beauty product line. A lot of people are not wearing makeup and not thinking of beauty right now, but they are thinking about hand sanitizer, right? And so their sales are doing great, and they're doing great things for their community. We're really proud to be partners with companies like that. And those are innovations that you're going to see across the board. So that's the American spirit and American business at its finest. And when you take technology that exists today, distributed know-how, things like Zoom that we're on today, it's amazing how you can do business. I mean, in my history, I used to fly over to Asia 4 or 5 times a year for 2 weeks at a pop. That's a lot of family time that you're missing, right? That's a lot of expense that you're incurring. And today you can do it seamlessly with a Zoom or other type of enabling tool and still have it very interactive and feel very good, right? Which is exciting. So in the logistics industry, I really believe all those types of things are happening. And when it comes to knowing your customers, there's no better time than now to get into business, to leverage the technology and the changes that are going on. And those that know their business best are going to have a tremendously bright future.
So Tim, talk to us about how you and Radial know your customer. We've referenced this quite a bit. Talk to us about the different ways that you go about finding out, who your customers really are and how you can best support their efforts.
That's a great question, Betsy. And so, as Betsy knows, when I joined here, Radial really did not know their customer. Our attrition rate was unacceptable. The client feedback was unknown, and it wasn't a great place. And I came on in and asked, a lot of questions. You couldn't get clear answers. You didn't have definitive answers. So we started with the basics. The first thing we did is we put in a proven program called the Net Promoter Score, which is where you ask people for their opinion. And you say, hi, would you recommend me? Right? And for those that are not familiar with the Net Promoter Score, it will give you a good idea. So will Tony and Betsy recommend Tim for another project? And a referral, it's old school, but that's basically what you're asking the client. So they're either a detractor, a passive, or a promoter, and you'd like your people to be promoters. What we had was, just as we thought, a lot of detractors and a whole ton of passives. In other words, people were doing business with us because, well, it was comfortable, right? It wasn't because I was doing a bad job. It was, you were average, right? And in today's world, you got to be better than average. So the next thing that we did is we said, well, okay, we have some commentary and feedback. Let's go talk to the customers and let's start to capture that information and let's put that into themes and stories to see, are there similarities? And yes, we found a lot of commonality, and we were able to go and put action plans against that and approach business differently, right? So we streamlined contracts, we became more forward-facing, we changed our pricing methodologies and structures, we tried to improve our communications on the sales side as well as in the support side. That evolved to the next step, which I'm really proud of, which is working with Betsy and her company on a customer advisory board. So the next thing we needed to do is sit down and talk to the CEOs, the executive vice presidents, to say, what is on your mind, not from a day-to-day perspective, but on a strategic perspective? Give me that idea of where do you want to be in 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and where are you thinking that takes you, and how and why, right? And what we started to do, and Betsy remembers this because the very first customer advisory board was fraught. We had a hurricane hitting the eastern seaboard. So we had all these people, planning on coming on in. And I think we ended up with 2 people being able to make it to the first one. And that was it. And one came all the way from the West Coast to the East Coast. And, but it was very enlightening. So even in that small environment, some of the things that we thought to be true were not. And some of the things we thought were priorities were not. And so simply by listening to them, we were able to get it. And so what I can say is if you can have a very proficient facilitator, which Betsy and her company is, it's really, really important to have that third-party facilitation. If you try to do this yourself, you're going to have an inherent bias. And by hiring a company like Betsy's, you're not. And they're going to give you real clean information. They're going to digest it. They're going to help you get through the meeting, make sure it's balanced. And what's happened is the number of people we've been able to have at our customer advisor board has increased. The insights have increased. And the net result is we've been able to modify our go-to-market strategy in alignment with those premises, thoughts, and it's paid off in huge dividends.
Can you go into a little bit about the relationship piece of that and excuse me, what's happened in terms of not just knowing their strategies and the business side of it, but the actual relationship building that goes on?
Yeah, absolutely, Betsy. So there's 2 things that are going on in the relationship in a customer advisory board. And I was a participant on many advisory boards, by the way, prior. This was the first time I had the opportunity to set it up my own way, right? So from a relationship perspective, we wanted the relationship to be pure and true and full of authenticity, right? We wanted them to understand that we were going to listen. It wasn't just us proposing or stating what we're going to do. It wasn't a junket. It was a very purposeful meeting. And so that transparency, that authenticity really came through. And the first thing that happened is the customers started to learn about things that we probably didn't share well enough or didn't know well enough, okay? And so what that allowed is us to secure a more partnership-related versus a supplier-type relationship initially. Right? And then unbeknownst to us, what started to happening is if you can think about this, if you're the CEO or an executive vice president of a company, you probably worked for a lot of companies, right? You probably did not come up and stay in one company your whole life. And even if you did, chances are you worked with lots of others in the industry. You have peers on other committees or on other organizations or advocacy boards or things like that. So the next thing that started happening, and this was not planned and we didn't expect it, but it was a huge benefit, is people would say, do you know Bob over at this company? The 2 of us were talking the other day and we were talking about our problem. And now that I hear this, Bob needs to hear this. Can I put you in touch with Bob? So it was really fascinating because it wasn't us asking for the referral. It was our clients going, I see the solve for a significant business problem and I have a friend who needs help or has a similar problem. Could you please be kind enough to go talk to him? So that's a very different approach, and that is something that's manifested itself. And so it's really turned into a very powerful thing. It's even turned into the point where some of our clients have been so gracious as to go to the National Retail Federation event with us in New York and actually have fireside chats or speak on panels as independent advisors as to what they're seeing and how their journeys were made. So it's their give back to the community. And I think that's the mutual benefit. They weren't thinking that way. We weren't thinking that way. But at the end, it's everybody is benefiting, either those that we work directly with or otherwise.
Yeah, and just taking that one step further, talk to us a little bit about not just Radial's relationship with the customers, but also the relationships that they've formed with one another.
Again, we didn't think that that was going to be a benefit. It's actually been told to us, and Betsy, you can corroborate, but I believe the number one benefit of hosting the meetings that they've said is having free downtime to have a good conversation with a peer, right? A peer that was either in a related business, and that's a good point. We typically will not have direct competitors on our customer advisory board. They may be in a related business, so they may be in a footwear business or a retail business that sells footwear, right? But they're not direct competitors. But it's been amazing because we carved out time for them to sit down in either small groupings or one-on-one, and we've even facilitated the ability for them to connect on their own merits, which they have in fact done. So they really enjoy each other's company. All too often when you're running a business, especially at that level, your head's down, you've got your board telling you what to do, right? You've got Wall Street telling you what to do. You have your bankers advising you what to do. It's a lot of pressure. And in this case, it's really turned into something that I think that they value most. And we actually baked in a little bit of extra time to our customer advisory board to facilitate that. And that's good for us too. We've also gone to them and said, hey, maybe we want to have a one-on-one or a 2-to-1 time, small group working sessions. And so in one case, ironically, we have a scenario where we have a major retailer and we have a footwear provider, and now that footwear provider's products are in that retailer's in stores. So they've become partners because of that process, which I'm really proud to see.
It's fascinating to hear this because we've talked so long, Betsy and I, and we wrote it in our book, that business to business is not about really business to business, it's person to person. And you're demonstrating that in the work you're doing, not just on the customer advisory boards, but really in the relationships that are being built and how you're supporting your community. So I find it really fascinating. The more conversations Betsy and I have had as we've done these interviews for the podcast, we're finding executives in all different industries saying exactly the same thing. It's about person to person. And so I think about the kind of the academic things, like you have gotten my MBA and they teach you B2B and it's all about business. It's not. The academics have to get out there in the world and really meet people, I think.
Well, it's funny. So, as I said, so I went to Bowling Green State University as undergraduate. Why? Well, I was paying for my own college and it was close to home. Oh, by the way, I had a bunch of friends that went there, right? Made it easy. I went to Auburn because they had a great executive MBA program that allowed me to spend time with people, but also be able to travel the world while I was doing it, right? What I can tell you is that the relationships that have formed from there, ironically, there's a good friend of mine. He's the CFO of a major competitor of mine today. So when we went to business school together, neither one of us, we were in very different businesses. I was at FedEx and he was in a different company. But, we both worked our way up in the pyramid. And so it's funny because we still have conversations. Hey, what are you facing in this environment? How are you trying to deal with this? There's been times where I've looked, and he's more in the B2B space. I'm more in the e-commerce space. So when opportunities come in my way, I'm like, it's really not what we do best, but I know a great friend over here, right? And I'm going to recommend him. And he's come back the same way. Hey, if you got big and bulky, that's me, but I'll take your refrigerators and your white goods and that kind of stuff all day long. But that little tiny stuff, that's just not us. Go talk to Tim. So you're absolutely right, Tony. It is about relationships. And I believe those relationships are founded on authenticity, trust, reliability. Yeah. And, the reality is when things become uncertain, when things become unclear, it's that trust is what we want most, right? We want honesty and trust to know, hey, how am I going to work with you on this? How are we going to get through this together? Right. And I've had a whole lot of those calls in the last 3 weeks. And it's amazing because what we've seen is where you have real partnerships, it has been based on those relationships, and when people have become very antagonistic or adversarial, it's typically because they're under a lot of duress and they're out there alone, right? And they're concerned, right? And so even and then, we've had good conversations. I've been able to take very acidic conversations and say, look, I'm your only way you're getting the product to your market. You can't pay me in 120 days and expect me to find people to be able to get the goods to you. I'm paying my people weekly and daily, and so it won't work, right? But let's grow together. So in fact, I had one of these conversations literally just yesterday. And at the end of the conversation was, okay, how do we grow the business? Can you give me another 100,000 square feet and can we double the sales throughput? And so it went from, hi, how do you give me 120-day terms? My CEO and CFO told me I need 120-day terms. And I said, it's not reasonable. It's not, but hey, how about if we grow together? Won't that be better, right, than getting extended terms? Let's grow our business together, which was funny because he called me back. It was one of my first calls back this morning. He goes, oh my God, our CEO is thrilled because this morning I told him, I think we got a way to double the sales. And so our team is working aggressively to figure out if we can, make that happen. We think we can, by the way, and we're pretty convinced of it.
And that goes back. Oh, sorry, Tim. Go ahead.
No, it just goes back to relationship time and time again, and knowing your customer, knowing the capabilities, knowing those relationships, knowing the boundaries of what's real and what's not real always helps.
Well, and it also goes back to the idea of creativity and innovation. I mean, yes. That was a creative way to steer that conversation. So innovation and creativity isn't necessarily product limited. It's how you deal with your customers.
Yeah, we had another client the other day. So they used our VendorNet tool. So they only used us for drop shipping enablement. Okay, but their mainline DC got shut down. They were deemed unnecessary in the environment that they were in the town or the community. And so local rules prevailed. And, they're like, oh my goodness, I can't get my product to market, right? So we figured out how to take our dropship product that they were already connected to. So they already had the IT integration. And we said, why can't we treat one of my own warehouses like a giant dropship vendor? And very quickly, what we did was we moved, I forget how many trailers, but a lot of trailers of product from their mainline e-commerce fulfillment center up to one of our buildings where we had space. And I think it took us 4 days to move the product, get it inventoried, and have the sales take over. So they only had a 4-day lapse. And it wasn't me that came up with the idea. It was actually one of our frontline people who said, what's the difference between, a vendor and one of my own vendors? One of my own buildings. Why can't we do that? And, I got my head of IT on the phone. I'm like, I think they have something here. Neither one of us thought about it, but it worked. And we called back the client. We said, if you're game, we're game. Let's give it a go, and it's working. It's working great. So, again, I love when you sit down and if you listen to your employees, and that's the other thing. So I'm going to step back a minute. There's no better time to be humble and appreciative of your employees than today. Mm-hmm. Okay? They are more creative, scrappy, thoughtful than most people give them credits for. And it's turning out to be one of the most powerful innovation things. I would have never thought about sewing masks with embroidery and other sewing equipment we had in our Martinsville building. Wouldn't have thought of it. All of a sudden they did it. They're like, I'm on a call yesterday and like, hey, we're cranking out this many. And I'm like, holy moly, this is amazing. This is crazy. So it's great time for innovation, great time to, instill confidence into your workforce, listen to your customers, listen to your workforce, and I think the results will be amazing.
That's awesome, Tim. I love the whole concept of listening at every level, obviously, but listening to your frontline people because they have such a different perspective on the business. So that's a really great point. Tim, do you have, we always like to ask on the show, do you have a community organization that you support that you'd like to give a shout out to? And, how do you do your give back to the community? In your spare time.
No, we do. So Radial has Radial is owned by bpost, which is the Belgian post office. And therefore, community service is in the DNA of the company and always has been. So when I came here, it was kind of interesting. I asked that question myself. I said, do we have something? And most companies that are larger of our size typically have a company, a partner. And I always got frustrated with that in some of my prior employment because I said, it's going to wherever the headquarters is, which is maybe not where my employees are actually based. And I never understood that. So I was always a big believer in support your local community. So that's what Radial does. We empower our local facilities, whether they're call centers or fulfillment centers around the country, to pick and choose what they feel is best. The only thing that we as an organization promote is things around education, because we think education is important and personal development is important. And a lot of people sometimes think of a company like ours as only having frontline hourly workers. And yes, they are a large portion of our workforce, but I can tell you many stories of people that started in those roles, took the time to develop themselves personally, and moved into supervisory managers, site director levels, people that went on and became educated to the point where they're now engineers, managing the site, if you think of all the material handling systems we have, it takes advanced degrees and knowledge or specialty or mechanical type knowledges to deal with the HVAC systems, the material handling systems. We have data scientists that we're hiring to look at data and analytics, a ton of IT people. So we're big on education for those reasons, but we also have our employees support things. So we support everything from local families who are in need, and GoFundMe pages. We have things where maybe somebody's facing trials and tribulations due to a personal health matter, to the local softball teams or the little sports teams for all of our kids of all of our communities. So we let them pick and choose what they want, and we believe that's the right thing. We believe that going back to the community, and again, listening to our employees, if they feel that's what's best, we're all in. So thank you for that.
That's awesome, Tim.
So, well, it's been a real pleasure. Other questions? I'm not sure where we are on time.
I think we're just ready to wrap up. Just want to know, Tim, how can people find you, reach out to you, follow you, reach out to Radial? What's the best way to stay connected?
Lots of different ways. So you can go to Radial, Radial, just like you see on the screen right there, radial.com. So you can go to radial.com and there's an inquiry page there. You can contact me on LinkedIn. So I'm Tim Hinckley on Radial at LinkedIn. So you can look for me there. My email address is THINCKLEY@radial.com. Pretty simple. So either one of those ways, we'll be more than happy to get you in touch with the right person and help you out. If you are a European company and are interested, we have operations in Europe. We have operations in Australia, in Canada as well. So we are a global organization that can help people in a lot of different places. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, great, Tim. Thank you so much for being here. This was a great conversation, and we really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me, and all the best to both of you.
You too.
Tim.
Thanks.
Wow, what a fantastic interview, Betsy. Tim is just full of amazing information and also a great perspective on how the world is shifting. And, the paradigm shift started a while ago, but we're seeing an acceleration with what we're going through right now. And his perspective on, listening to the employees was fantastic, because getting down to the creativity that's being unlocked, how his customers are saying, hey, how can we do this in a different way because my city is shut down or my state is shut down? What can we do next? And because they have all of this network built up, they can flip. And it reminds me of another interview that we are going to have on our podcast about the digital mindset. I mean, it's so much, his mindset plays very much into that. So look forward to that in one of our future podcasts.
Yeah, I agree, Tony. I thought it was just such a fascinating conversation. And I think Tim's one of those leaders that really epitomizes what it means to be, even though he's in business to business, he's definitely a person to person leader. and the way he talked about really knowing your customers, which of course what we're all about on this podcast, but just how he exemplifies that and how he executes on that theory. And so I just thought, the stories he told of the creativity and listening to the front line and the relationships he's building with his customers through the customer advisory board, and it was just one of those conversations that left me feeling like, wow, we're really going to be okay, and business is going to be awesome moving forward, because there are leaders out there of big organizations that are willing to pivot in an unprecedented time.
Absolutely. So I'd encourage you listeners to think about what you heard on the show. Hopefully you were taking notes and you thought of some things that really would impact your business today. Take those things and schedule them out, figure out when you're going to do them, and take action on those, so that this podcast isn't just you listening for 30 minutes or so. It's information that gives you insights that allows you to really take the next step forward.
Absolutely. Thanks everybody for being here. We hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as we did, and we will see you next time on the Really Know Your Customer podcast. See you then.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Really Know Your Customer. We hope you gained a lot of value from being here today. If you want to learn more about the work Betsy and Tony do to help their clients thrive, visit Betsy at thecongruitygroup.com and Tony at tonybodoh.com. See you next time on the Really Know Your Customer show.